when they say the 1,600-meter race is at 2 o'clock, you better not get there at 2:01. A boy at Utica in my son's class had finally one of the few qualifiers ever make it to the state meet in the mile, and he missed the start. His coach never recovered. I'm telling you, what a travesty that was. So we're going to start at 4 minutes after. I'd like to do some introductions before we start talking about our inductees. I'm John Lambert, and I grew up in Centerburg, and only half of what you hear about me is true. I just don't know which half. First, I'd like to introduce our museum director who sponsors this event, Jim Gibson. Jim, would you come up and say a few words?
Thanks, John. I want to welcome all of you. What a wonderful turnout we had to the Knox County Historical Society Museum, and to be part of our ongoing program of inductees of Knox County outstanding athletes to our Sports Hall of Fame. We have limited these induction ceremonies to family and friends, and you can see why. Because if we had this open to the public, we would have people sitting in the parking lot, I'm sure. But I just wanted to mention the yellow sheet on your chairs lists our next monthly program of the Historical Society, which will be this coming Wednesday, October the 4th, when we have evening programs monthly, 7:30 p.m. next Wednesday, and John and several of the other presenters here today are going to be with us Wednesday evening, and we're going to go over all 22 of the inductees so far to touch on the highlights of their sports accomplishments. So if any of you are able to come to that Wednesday evening, 7:30, we'll be happy to see you again. The museum is open Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays from 2 until 4 in the afternoon. March through November, we close for the winter months. And we're always happy to have people come back when they can spend a little more time with us. After the ceremony here today, we want you all to go back into our big exhibit area where we have our Sports Hall of Fame exhibit and a wonderful display of all 22 of the folks that have been inducted into the Hall of Fame so far. I'd also mention if you, when you go back there, the restrooms are right to the left of the big yellow Thunderbird. And so that's always essential that I mention that fairly early in the event. So thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoy yourself today, and please come back sometime in the future if you can.
Next, I would like to introduce, we have two members who are stepping down from our committee. Our committee had 7 members, and 2 members are stepping down this year. Actually, I just heard a third, Jim Wagner in the back. Where are you, Jim? Jim from Fredericktown just informed me that he would also be stepping down, and so we'll take care of him because the reason I say that is we have a certificate for members who have served for us, but since I didn't know until today, we'll get Jim's to him. So Dick Mavis is also stepping down. Former Mayor Dick Mavis was our chairman. He called me at 11:15 today, and he said, "John, I know you can handle it." All right. He'd kind of give me some forewarning that might happen. He's with his wife Peggy at this time. And so Dave Greer, if you'd come forward, I'd like to present you with a certificate of appreciation. And I'd like to read this to the audience. It says, Dave Greer is being recognized today in appreciation for helping to lay the foundation of the future of the Knox County Sports Hall of Fame. Your efforts to establish the criteria for inclusion, the voting procedures, and the eligibility for athletes, coaches, and contributors have been instrumental and will greatly assist future committees to elect the most deserving inductees. And on the back, and I wish all of you could see this, on the back we have a map of Knox County with all the original schools on there, like as on the back of your program. Your work with this committee to induct 15 legendary athletes and coaches may go unnoticed by most. But this committee is indebted to your dedicated effort to submit, evaluate, and elect only the best in Knox County sports history. Now, you are part of that history. Thank you, Dave. Dave says he'll talk later.
Not about myself.
Would like to introduce two of our incoming committee members. Probably my person I've had the longest friendship with. I probably started when I was 14. Former coach for Fredericktown and Lexington and Norwalk, Tom Foster. Where are you, Tom? Right there, Tom Foster. Tell me if I'm right, Tom. Coached 52 consecutive years?
Close enough.
Wow. And former sports writer and now editor of the new newspaper. And what is it called? The Weekly News? Fred, where are you? Knox Weekly. Fred, stand up. Fred's coming on. He's just a young guy, so he's really going to be instrumental in helping us to look at those athletes, you know, from the 90s and newer than that, because we're aging, you know. We know all those guys who performed in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and that's why they're not forgotten. But we do need some assistance on those younger people because they've done some extraordinary things. Next, I would like to introduce someone who was inducted in the last class but was unable to be here. So I would like to just to do a brief introduction of Coach J.D. Graham, 1965 St. Vincent graduate. And of course, anybody who read the paper at all or followed sports knows that J.D. went to Newark Catholic as a very young man. I think he was 23. Coached there for 21 years. And as of today, he's the, percentage-wise, the winningest football coach in Ohio history. That's retired, because there's this jerk over at Marion Local who's won 13 state championships. But if he lost the next 49 games, his winning percentage would be lower than JD's. 87.4, I think, is what you won. 87.6%. Fractions matter in this game. So with that, I'd like to present this to Jay, and then he wants to do an introduction himself.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. Would you rather I use the microphone or just talk?
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me in the back?
Yep.
You can? Well enough? Okay. First of all, John, thank you for this award. It's truly appreciated. I could not be here. Kelly had qualified for a trip with State Farm, and we were actually out of the state. But it's greatly appreciated, and it's nice to come back here and kind of relive all these memories with all these folks that most of them you've known. Okay, so enough about myself. This is pretty serious stuff here. We have a gentleman that's been very, very involved in sports for a lot of years here in Mount Vernon and Knox County. I, for one, was somebody that greatly appreciated what Phil Hobler did for a lot of years. He was one of the true believers, in the importance of youth athletics. And not only did he sponsor teams and promote teams, he convinced other folks, other business owners, other folks in the community that they should do the same. I remember in Little League, back in those years, there were 3 leagues, the American, the National, and the Federal League, and we had a city championship. All those teams, I think, were sponsored by all the animal clubs. The Moose, the Lions, all those people. Okay? I don't remember anybody individually, business owners that did that. Okay? And I'm kind of bragging here. We had an opportunity. John Parnell and I played baseball together for 11 years. Our moms sat together at every game. We were fortunate enough to win the city championship in Little League Baseball. And then we went to Babe Ruth League. And that's where Phil Hobler, in my life, came on the scene. And we played, I think, for the first Hobler Oldsmobile Cadillac Babe Ruth team, and we were able to win that championship. And I have a picture in my phone. Now think about this, back in those days. Not only did we win the league, I have a picture, John Parnell, myself, Jimmy Stillwagon was on that team, a couple other St. Vincent kids. He bought us all jackets, and I mean nice jackets. And boy, you wore those around Mount Vernon, you felt pretty cool. And of course, he's in the picture with his jacket on too. And then the Legion deal. He convinced John Miner, Coca-Cola, and some of those folks to sponsor the more senior amateur baseball programs. He did all that. But the big thing is that he's a real incredible motivator and pusher for what we're doing here today. I don't know, seriously, after talking to Jim the other day, if we would be sitting here honoring these great athletes from the past if it wasn't for Phil Hobel. And not only the motivation, the financial support, there were a lot of things that he did to make this event possible. So here's the first thing, Phil, I'd like to give to you, or I'd like to read for you. It said, the Knox County Sports Hall of Fame is being, Phil Hobler is being honored on this date for your unrelenting effort to see your lifelong dream of establishing this Hall of Fame to enshrine Knox County's finest athletes, coaches, and contributors. So we thank you for that. And on the other side, it says Knox County Sports Hall of Fame. Today we pay tribute to you for over 60 years of support of youth sports, sponsorships of the Fred Hayes Irreplaceable It Happened Here column, which ran for 10 years, and for bringing over 100 NFL players to Knox County to appear on the radio and then sign autographs at your Cadillac dealership. Let your legacy reflect that you were the driving force behind the establishment of this hallowed hall. Welcome home, Phil. Phil Hobel.
From the bottom of my heart. Well, I don't want to scare you with this folder. I'm not going to talk very long. I just want to mention a couple personal things. The first Hall of Fame, can you hear me in the back? The first Hall of Fame, I made a disastrous mistake. And I want to tell you what it was. I thanked everybody I could think of. And I'm not going to do that today because there's just too many to thank. God bless all of you. But the one person I left out was my wife. Now this is more serious than leaving the toilet seat up. This is a bad mistake. And I'm going to ask her, she'll chew me out for this later, but I'm going to ask her to stand up and give her a hand. A quick story. I was married 20 years ago down in Florida, and some of my old pals had a little party for me up here in Mount Vernon to introduce my new wife and so forth. So I did, and we had a nice event, and about halfway through it, how about people remember Win Curry?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Win come over to me and whispered in my ear, "Phil, you kind of robbed the cradle, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes, I did, Win. However, if I married somebody my own age, we'll be out the rest of them getting her right now." So there's a lot of things by marrying a younger woman that's helpful now, other than this damn watch and this phone and all that stuff I don't know how to work. So I wear it and act like I know how this works. I don't. Barbara's a broker down in Florida and a very hard worker and a wonderful wife. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to mention 3 people died that were important to this organization. The first one was Richie Hoyt. Richie, we lost Richie. Excuse me. I got a nice letter from his wife telling me that Richie really appreciated being in this Hall of Fame, and he would have been here had he been able to ride. So God bless Rich, I hope he's looking down. Second one was somebody we all know, Jimmy Spicer. Jim was one of the most loved coaches ever. He could lose a game and they'd pat him on the back. I mean, he just was a good guy and a coach and a person that we all miss. And the third one was a fellow named Don Swigan. And Don was a great guy. Don was such a great athlete that he was offered. The Cleveland Indians told him he'd be the third baseman if he signed. And Cleveland Browns were interested. Two major teams wanted him. But he didn't want to do it. He wanted to go ahead and get his doctor's degree and teach. And one of the great teams he had, he invited me to their final class reunion. Earl Bechtel, who anybody knows Earl knows that he was Woody Hayes' choice to be the fullback at Ohio State, and he broke his leg in practice. Earl was a tremendous athlete. And Merle Doyle, probably one of the best shooters ever. He just was a natural shooter. Jimmy Yours was good at everything. He went from Mount Vernon to Fredericktown, and he was a quarterback at Worcester, and a really good one, and a really good fellow. Got his doctorate. And Pete Moore, who was a great athlete. Now, Dick Mavis is the only living member of the first group of people. That shows you, folks, how time flies. I would read this word for word, but I read like a third grader. It's a real pleasure for me to be here today, a real pleasure. It's a real pleasure for me to be anywhere. I was about 88 years old when I decided that Knox County needed a Hall of Fame for athletes. Knox County is loaded with good athletes, just loaded. And it was time that they had recognition. And thank God it all worked out. Thanks to all you people that worked hard on it. Then when it was over, I thought, well, you know, almost 90-some, 90. But I didn't know who to get. So all of a sudden, a light lit when I saw Dick Mavis come to one of our meetings, and I thought, well, there's a good guy. He's only 80 years old. Been a long time. He turned everything over to my buddy in Centerburg, one of the great basketball players of Centerburg. And not only a great basketball player, he had the best, now listen carefully, he had the best display of apple peelers. Apple peelers in the world, not the country, the world. And he's a first-class researcher. You better have your facts right if he's listening to you. Later on he'll tell you, well, you missed that. We all love him, and he's going to do a great job. Thank you for taking the job. Dick Mavis, you know, is he is a political legend, a legend. Half a century he was county commissioner and mayor, and what most people don't know about him, I'll tell you, he's not here. He's a Democrat. And here he is in Knox County, the foothold of all Republicans, and he's elected half a century. So he's done a good job at it. Suffice to say, we were lucky to have him, and we're lucky to have the new fellow. My right, left. What did I say next? Oh, yeah. The people he picked for the selection committee was unbelievable. I can't name them all because I went to Florida to live for a few years, and I don't know them. I wasn't around then, but I know their names from reading the sports page. And great people, leaders in the community. And I go back to Doug Davis. Doug was the anchor to the offensive line of the Minnesota Vikings for many, many years. Well, his coach was my hero. Bud Grant is really a great coach, a great person. He's one of the few people who played in the NBA and the National Basketball Association. He did both. He won a championship with the Lakers twice, and the second year in the National Football League, he caught 54 passes. So here's a guy doing what I was talking about. So when he was interviewed for the job, he had a press conference, and somebody said, "Hey, coach," said, "What do you look for in a pro athlete?" And here's what he said: size, speed, and citizenship. And he was a great citizen. One of the things that I'm sure he'd agree with today, great athletes come in all sizes, shapes, and forms. They're not all 6'7" and 300 pounds. And we had the best one, and the best ones anywhere was in this county. One of the things that they had in common denominator among the people that's been elected to your group is citizenship. They're all good citizens. In this world, a mixed up world that we're in right now, isn't it refreshing to find all these athletes that are good citizens? Really. That's the real test right there. So anyway, I'm sure the coach would agree with me on that. All these people that were elected to the Knox County Hall of Fame will be remembered forever. This display out here will be your grandfather's, your grandson's grandson. Will look and say, "Oh, that was my," and a lot of you are going to say to yourself, "Well, why didn't so-and-so in it?" Now, here's why. There's so many people in it that they try to go by age and take the older guys first. They'll be in it. They'll be in it. And the example of how these people think, I had the privilege of calling Richie Hoyt and Dick Mavis to tell them that they were going to be in the Hall of Fame. And when I called Richie Hoyt, the first thing he said to me, "How about Cookie Cunningham's? You know?" Don't worry about it. And then when I called Dick, first thing Dick said to me was, "How about the other guy in Danville, the dentist? What's his name?"
Larry Klein.
Huh?
Larry Klein.
Larry Klein. He would want to make sure that Larry was in it. And I said, "He's not right now, but I'm sure he will be." So as we go through all these people, it's just amazing to me to see the outcome that people come to see and people talk about it. And I want to thank each one of you for taking your valuable time to come out here today. And I want to point out a couple of people, if I might. Jim Kelly. Now, Jim Kelly has been described to me by the absolute authority, J.D. Graham, said that he's the best football player that St. Vincent ever had. He's one of the best guys St. Vincent ever had. Stand up, Jimmy. Come on. There he is. What you'll hear later today. One of the things that I did want to mention was that we don't have a lot of funding and things to do. Everybody chipped in. One thing they don't know about our president of the museum, sitting right here, he was a heck of a tennis player. And I heard that, and I said, "Well, I didn't think it." So you never know. Everybody has a sport and does well. So I want to thank you for your patience, and I want to thank you for being here, and God bless each one of you.
Phil would get shy and not be able to talk to this crowd. He did raise a very good point, and it's a question I ask myself all the time, and it is this. What do you have to do to get into this Hall of Fame? And I'll tell you the answer. It's very simple. You have to do something that no one else in the last 125 years has done. That's simple. And all 7 of these inductees, I can tell you with a straight face, every one of them did something that no one else has done, and that's how they got in. So I think I'm ready to talk about the first inductee, and before I do this, I have to get in the right mindsets. Get my medal out here. Harry Hyman. Never heard his name. I've been around sports all my life. Talked to guys, talked to old timers, heard names, read all of Fred Hayes' columns, and if you never read those columns, you missed something because they were wonderful. Every 2 weeks, Phil Hobler would sponsor a column by this former sports writer named Fred Hayes. Fred Hayes was born in 1900, so he saw the creation of football and basketball at Mount Vernon High School. Remembered it all. I don't know how I did. Mentioned hundreds of people's names. We wouldn't even have known those people. I don't ever remember reading Harry Hyman's name. But a former teacher, Lois Hanson, in the crowd today, taught at Sunderberg, taught at Mount Vernon, taught language arts and social studies. Started researching. Now, we're not digitalized. We're all spoiled. We go into the search bar, right? We put in somebody's name. You get all these things about them. You put Harry Hyman in there, you're not going to get anything. You walk in the back room and you turn page after page after page of newspapers and you find out things. And so I'm going to tell you about Harry Hyman today, and this is one of the gold medals he won in 1903. My wife tells me constantly, stay off of eBay. Lois, am I telling it right? We would have not known he had a living relative if it were not for eBay. Lois's daughter got on eBay and said, hey, this was like 3 weeks ago, they're selling Harry Hyman's gold medals on eBay. And I go, no. I get on there, they got 3 gold medals. Well, they got 2 of them now, because I got 1, okay? And we found out that Harry Hyman's son, who changed his name because he wanted to be an actor, his son changed his name to Guy Prescott, married a woman 23 years his junior, and she's still living in the state of Washington, Elizabeth Beckman. We've had many conversations, pinned down a lot of facts about Harry Hyman. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He was a phenomenal athlete. He wasn't very tall. You can look at his plaque back there. He's got a team picture of him. He's the shortest guy in there. But he left Mount Vernon, went to Ohio State, set the 100-yard dash record. And that stood up for 25 years till a couple of guys who came along, one of whom was Jesse Owens, and broke it, but he ran 9.8 way back in the early 1900s, 1901, 1902, because in 1902, he's been reading the papers, obviously, and he's reading all about the track program at Penn. Penn's an Ivy League school. It's in Philadelphia. Anybody know what their mascot is? The Quakers. That's exactly right. So he went from being a Buckeye to a Quaker. And why did he want to go to Penn? Well, nobody knows for sure, but I can tell you this. The Penn Relays, which are still going today, was the biggest track meet in the nation, started in 1895. That would have been on the sports pages. In 1897, 1898, 1899, Penn won the National Collegiate Track Championships. In 1900, their coach, Mike Murphy, took his team to the Olympics. The U.S. won 19 gold medals in the 1900 Olympics. Penn athletes won 11 of those. Their one sprinter won 4 gold medals, a guy named Alvin Kransline. Never heard of him before until I researched it. Nobody has done that since 1900. I know what you're going to say. Jesse Owens did it. No, he did not. He won 3 individuals and 1 relay. Nobody else has won 4 gold medals. I'm sure that would have got a young athlete's attention in the newspaper. So he transferred. He goes there. In 1905, he wins the national championship in the 440. The national championship. We got a guy from Mount Vernon who won a national championship in running. Got invited to the Olympics, but because he'd been injured in a race in England and he was already a successful civil engineer, he turned him down. I looked it up. His times would have won the Olympics in 1908 if he'd stuck with it. Now, that's all, speculation, because that's not to say you go and have your very, very best race, right? But his times were good enough to win the Olympics. And so he's our first inductee, and I'm going to read his certificate. And his is the only one I'm going to read before I bring Lois up here to accept on his behalf. Harry died in 1969 at the age of 87. And except for the name, everybody's certificate will say the same thing. Harry Abraham Hyman has been recognized for extraordinary achievements and contributions to Knox County sports and is hereby inducted on this date. And the back says, "Welcome to the Knox County Sports Hall of Fame. Our goal is to recognize and honor those who have had extraordinary accomplishments in sports as participants, coaches, or contributors. Consider this: Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Jack Dempsey, and Red Grange all performed over 100 years ago and are still household names. More recently, Billie Jean King, Wilma Rudolph, Babe Didrikson, and even Serena Williams have achieved equal status as sports icons. None will ever be forgotten, even if their records have been or will someday be surpassed. It is our hope that our local stars, many of whom are no longer with us, will forever be remembered and revered. Their spectacular feats not only stand as a testament to their greatness, but can serve as a goal for young athletes to achieve or exceed. Your name is now etched with the other greats of past generations, and we salute you for being among the greatest of all time in Knox County sports." And I can say that without reservation for all 7 inductees today. So, Lois, I know you'd like to say a few words and accept this on Harry's behalf.
I'm a former teacher. You okay in the back? Okay. I'm quite sure we would not be here today honoring Harry Hyman were it not for my daughter. In 2007, as she planned her wedding, she asked me when the last Jewish wedding had been in town. I had no answer. Then one day I was talking to Dr. Laura Lee Porter, who had written a history of early Mount Vernon, and she told me about the first Jewish wedding in town in 1865. She gave me the bride's father's name, Adolf Wolf, and I researched that wedding. After that, I thought I would like to know more about the Wolf family, so I dug deeper. And then I thought, why not find all the Jewish families who had lived in Mount Vernon in the 19th and early 20th centuries? And that's how I found Harry Hyman and his family. From the moment Harry's father, Louis Hyman, walked downtown in May of 1881, smiling broadly and telling everyone it's a boy, glimpses of Harry's life were captured in the local papers. Louis Hyman made sure that Harry's running successes at Ohio State, Penn, and the United Kingdom were in the local newspapers. But Louis's brothers Max, who would be Harry's uncle, also lived in town, and the newspapers were always getting the 2 men mixed up. The brothers were German Jews who spoke with an accent and probably looked somewhat alike. If you look at Harry's high school senior picture from the Mount Vernon High School and that of his first cousin Henry, the 2 could be twins. So while Harry's setting all kinds of running records and winning gold medals and trophies at home and abroad, his uncle, who distributed and sold beer and liquor, was running afoul of the local and state temperance laws. And his name and details of his arrests would always appear in the papers. He would plead not guilty, be found guilty, pay the fine, reopen his establishment, and then repeat the entire process. Max was also setting records, but for the number of times arrested. So it must have been frustrating for Louis when the papers would say that Harry, the running phenom, was Max's son. And this happened frequently. The final time it occurred was when Mr. R. Hyman, not a Mr. at all, but Harry's aunt was credited with being Harry's father. I don't know what Lewis said or did down at the paper, but after that, there were no more mistakes. Harry Hyman, the fastest human in Mount Vernon's history, and Lewis was his proud father. On behalf of Harry's descendants who know nothing about him, on behalf of his family like Elizabeth Beckman, who do know things about his athletic prowess, and on behalf of the Jewish community of Mount Vernon and Gambier, thank you.
If you want to read a fascinating history of Mount Vernon, Lois's book, Our Worthy Townsmen, The Forgotten Lives of Mount Vernon, Ohio's Jewish Families, 1847 to 1920. Some great stories in there. They weren't all lawbreakers either. All right, let's turn the page here and talk about one of the true immortals in Mount Vernon that I had never heard of. Barbara Bobby Keimer, a fast pitch phenom of the 40s and 50s. By the way, is anybody here on her behalf? Stand up. How many? I would like to see how many people here are on Bobby's. That's what I call respect right there. I'll tell you what. We lost Bobby in 2017 after she had a long career with National Cash Register in Dayton. But she moved back to Mount Vernon, and I just wish I could have met her one time. Okay, she started pitching at 11 in her backyard. There weren't any women's sports back then, or girls' sports. You know, some women played softball and stuff, but in girls' sports, there wasn't anything really to speak of. But her dad taught her to pitch, and by 14, she was so good, she was pitching on women's teams. Now, folks, I have a 14-year-old granddaughter. She's a straight-A student, brimming with confidence. But if I stuck her out there on the field with women, she would die of fear. I'm telling you, I don't know how this kid did this. She had to be something special. You know, but when you look at her record, I don't think she was afraid. I think the batters who had to face her were probably shaking, okay? How good was she? She threw 32 no-hitters, won 7 state championships. She's tied with you, JD. And once in succession, she beat the Pittsburgh Rayettes, the Cincinnati Jets, and the Detroit Sporting Goods teams, all big teams. Big deal? She did it in 12 hours. Beat all 3 of those teams in a 12-hour span. Let me just quote Fred Hayes, who I have utmost respect for because he did not exaggerate. He just documented things. He wrote over 250 articles for Phil Hobler. And here's what he said in 1963. 60 years ago, Fred Hayes said, "If ever there is a Hall of Fame in this county, Bobby Keimer should be in it." He wrote about hundreds of athletes. He only made that statement about 2 people. Let the record show that 250 articles, and he mentioned her and one other person. When I think about her traveling the country, I don't know why, it's the way my mind works. I thought back to my own college days when we traveled, and it was exciting, you know. And you know, when you're an athlete, you girls like athletes. I mean, that was to me the biggest incentive. You know, girls liked you. And I remember this one time we had a road game. We'd had a tournament out of state, and we stayed in a nice hotel. And that night I was trying to get some sleep, and these 2 girls just kept knocking on my door, knocking on my door, knocking on my door. I couldn't take it anymore. I got up and let them out. So I hope I'm conveying my utter respect for Bobby Keimer, because what she did, she couldn't have had many role models to do this. She was blazing a path, and imagine the young girls. They said up to 1,700 people would pack Riverside Park to watch her play. If I'd have known about it, I would have been there. And so since she's not with us, her nephew, Ron Dowd, will come forward to accept her award and say a few words.
I'm not the speaker as it levels, so we'll do this the best I can. I am Ron, one of her nephews. My grandparents, John and Madeline Keimer, they were known as Shag and Sis. Lived in the West End. They had 6 girls. And Bobby was the oldest. My mom, Virginia, was next. With us today is my Aunt Karen, the youngest. Right. I didn't plan on this.
Yeah.
Phyllis came from California.
Yeah.
Your Aunt Phyllis came from California. For this award presentation, my aunts Betty Majors and Frances Wilcox have passed away. I am proud to say my
cousins from all 6 and all 5 of Bobby's sisters are with us here today.
this just shows the love we all have for Bobby. Shag was a big baseball fan and
Fortunate. I didn't use spell check.
I'm a teacher and I couldn't have figured that one. Okay, fortunate for women's fast pitch. It was very popular at the time. Earlier we heard of Bobby's softball achievements, but she was a natural at all sports. She stopped bowling in the mid-1970s with a 178 average. Local sports writer Fred Hayes told me he saw her play golf and she could have played on the women's tour.
Wow.
I was talking with a coworker one day and said only that my mother was a Keimer. He said, the Keimer girls from the West End? And I said, yes. He said he knew Bobby and that they would not let her play football with the boys because they were afraid she would hurt them. After 30 years working for National Cash Register in the Dayton area, she recruited,
Who recruited her to play softball and gave her a job as well.
okay. She moved back to this area near her 4 sisters, as Phyllis was in California at the time. She lived in an apartment on Beach Street, and one day she saw a neighbor girl placing her ball bag in her car. And she said to the girl, I played baseball or softball, and the girl says, oh, you know. And so it was not long after that that the Looking Glass came out. And when the Looking Glass came out, it had a large article about Bobby and all of her achievements. And the girl saw Bobby later and said, you told me you played softball, but you really played softball. What would you like to read next? He said, I'd ask her about her playing days, and she said she played so many games that it all just ran together. I would like to thank the committee for all your work in making this happen and honoring the people, but it also brings families together as well, and I want to thank you for that. Finally, I've been fortunate to know some past inductees and some coming in this time, and I want to say to the committee, you got it right, and they're much deserving.
Excuse me. Isn't it kind of amazing how much this means to the families? Is that awesome?
Yeah.
I I've got the great honor of introducing a good friend, terrific athlete. Most of us, let me just ask this question. How many of you had the opportunity to see Jimmy Bird play at some level of competition when he was here at Mount Vernon? How many of you saw this kid play? Yeah. Just briefly, I met his wife Paulette of 40 years they were together, and had an opportunity to tell her a couple of stories on the way down here today. Kelly and I, we drove by the Dairy Queen or whatever that is, the ice cream place, and then the park across the street was Riverside Park. I look back and I see Mike Little back there and so forth, and he lived in that area and he was involved in this too. He played a lot of basketball with Jimmy Bird. But the first time I ever saw Jim Bird, he was in the 7th grade and I was in the 8th grade. He was born September 13th, I was born September 14th of 47, so we were literally the same age, the whole deal. St. Vincent's, we had an 8th grade scrimmage. We had a scrimmage with Mount Vernon Junior High School at the new junior high at that time. And to this day, I will never forget this. I had heard about Jim Bird, but I had never met him. We were getting ready to come out of the locker room for the scrimmage, and the Mount Vernon kids went first. And I looked and I saw this kid, and it literally took my breath away. The physique that Jimmy Bird had, even in junior high school, was almost overwhelming. I mean, this was a man-child. Physically, he was a phenom. He really was, and he had an incredible build. He had the legs of a 220-pound running back. I mean, the kid was just, you kind of would go, wow. And then you saw him play. His quickness, his athleticism, his jumping ability was just, and his competitiveness was unparalleled. He was incredible. Now, a lot of people don't know this. Is he the only athlete, John, to make All-Ohio in football and basketball?
In Mount Vernon, we've not found another person.
He's the only athlete of all the great athletes that have come out of Mount Vernon High School to make All-Ohio in football and basketball. Okay, and in those days there was only A and AA. There was only 2 divisions. There was no watering down. They only picked first team and second team. Okay, it's not like today where there's numerous selections. So this was unique. Now think about this. He led the CBL, the league with Mount Vernon, Upper Arlington. Worthington had 1 high school then. Delaware, Urbana, Bexley, Grandview, and Whitehall. I think those are the teams that made up the CPL. It was the premier public school league in Central Ohio at that time. He led that league in rebounding all 4 years as a freshman. Now he was only somewhere between, I'm going to say, Pauline, 5'10", 5'11". I got that how I remembered that, I think, as far as his height and so forth. It was incredible how athletic he was. And we would play at Riverside Park literally until the lights went out at 11 o'clock. And I loved to play against him because a lot of times we would play one-on-one for a milkshake or whatever at the dairy aisle, Dairy Queen. And he made you better because he did things physically that nobody else could do. His quickness, his jumping ability was just incredible. Now this is an amazing story too. And I was telling my wife Kelly on the way here. Those of you who are old enough to remember where the old Mount Vernon football field was, right across from the park by that dairy aisle place. I was a sophomore at St. Vincent's. And I had an opportunity, we had a Saturday night game, Mount Vernon played their games on Friday. I was walking into the stadium from High Street, literally walking in the gate, and Jimmy was a freshman, starting on the varsity as a freshman. And I can remember this like it was yesterday. Mount Vernon would always open up with Coshocton. And it was the first play of the game. And I'm walking in and I could see like the Red Sea open up. This play was really well blocked. Jimmy has his first carry as a Mount Vernon High School athlete. He goes 70 yards for a touchdown the first time he touched the ball. And the rest of this just became legendary. I mean, he was the real deal. He was a great guy. A lot of people wondered where Jimmy Bird was going to go to school. I don't know how many of you remember the name Greg Kundrat. In my mind, Greg Kundrat's probably the finest quarterback in the history of Mount Vernon High School. Absolutely brilliant kid. Went to Harvard, played football and baseball at Harvard. Got his medical degree from Ohio State. I talked to him about a month ago when we were telling Jim Bird stories. He remembers the first time he saw Jimmy Bird, and very much like myself, he was a little bit overwhelmed by him when he saw him. But he told me that Jimmy was so competitive, okay, that he literally a lot of times wouldn't leave practice right after practice because he had to do so many things. If I didn't do so many of these, so many of these, so many of these. And the thing that was amazing is that everything was so natural to him. He was so fluid that it was almost like he didn't have to even try hard because it was amazing. And if you remember, it was fun to go to those Mount Vernon basketball games. In that little gymnasium, that little bandbox gym that they had, boy, they used to give teams fits. They run that press with Houston Slosser, the press. Newark had those great teams that would come in there. They were rated #1 in the state one year. Mount Vernon had them on the ropes. Urbana won the state championship with the Evans brothers. I remember that, Gail and Van Evans. Gail Evans was first team All-Ohio, 6'5". Jump ball, Bird wins the jump ball at 5'10". I mean, it was just, and even opponents would, it was just amazing. But now, where is this kid going to go to school? And I get back to the Kundrat story quickly. I asked Greg, I said, everybody thought Jim Bird was possibly going to go to Syracuse. And at that time, Syracuse was one of the elite programs in the country. They had the great Jim Brown, okay, who should have won the Heisman Trophy his senior year. And by the way, people don't know this, Paul Hornung of Notre Dame, he was a quarterback at Notre Dame, won the Heisman Trophy. Notre Dame was 2-8 that year. And Paul Hornung won the Heisman Trophy. So you can tell how political and what the social system was in our country at that time. Then came Ernie Davis, who won the Heisman Trophy. Well, Jimmy always wore 44, and whatever he played, Ernie Davis was his idol. George Culberson, who owned the Mount Vernon News, was a Syracuse graduate. He had worked hard to make it possible for Jimmy to visit and hopefully attend his alma mater, Syracuse. They wanted him to feel free and welcome. They asked Greg Kundrat, his high school quarterback, to make the visit with him. So Greg went with him on his visit to Syracuse. The head coach then was a guy named Ben Schwarzkopf, one of the great coaches in the country at that time. Syracuse had great teams. And he said, JD, I remember specifically. I remember the Ernie Davis 44. He looked at Jimmy and he said, Jimmy, we're saving number 44 for you. We're saving this number for you. So that was the deal. Mount Vernon had a great football coach when Jim and Greg Kundrat were there. A coach named Chuck Stobart, who went on to great success. Was an assistant coach for Bo Schembecker at Michigan for over a decade. Was the head coach at Toledo, at Memphis, different places. He ended up his career at Ohio State. He was a receiver coach at Ohio State. I had an opportunity to spend some time with him when he was there. But here was the deal. He had left Mount Vernon after Jimmy's junior year. Okay, went to Marshall as an assistant and then to Cincinnati. And as I think most of you might know, Jimmy ended up going to Cincinnati. And I think he played some running back and some defensive back both there. Fought some injuries, okay? But anyway, I think that's probably why he went to Cincinnati, because he had his ex-coach as a running back coach at Cincinnati. Never really had a chance to talk to him about that. But he was a great guy. He was a fun guy. He always had a smile on his face. I've had a chance to spend a little bit of time with Pauline on the phone and a little bit tonight. two beautiful children, three grandchildren, I believe. She's going to tell us a little bit about that. Pardon me?
5 grandchildren.
5 grandchildren, excuse me. Okay. But anyway, and when it's all said and done, his greatest love was pool. He loved to shoot pool. Loved it. Not liked it. Loved it. And at that time, excuse me, in Mount Vernon, people in my era, the guys that graduated in the 50s through the 60s, Mount Vernon was happy days. We grew up during happy days. It was a phenomenal place to live, to grow up, what they had for the youth, all the dances, all the activities that St. Vincent's had and Mount Vernon had. There was always something for us to do. But there was a place called Ted's. It was Ted's Pool Hall down on the same side of the street as the alcove. It was down about a block further, and it was really a nice place. It wasn't like we think of sometimes the old pool hall. There were a lot of high school kids that would go in there on Saturdays. We'd go to the Y first. You remember the old Y. There would be 200 kids up there every Saturday, church league basketball, okay, all that stuff, and then we'd head down to Ted's to play pool. And boy, Jimmy was in his element there. First of all, he was great. He was a great pool player. And talking to the missus, he even got better at it. He really, that was his great love. His family and his pool. That's where his attention was. But anyway, it's a great honor to recognize Jimmy in this capacity. Well deserved. Hopefully there'll be a couple more folks from that era and from those teams. Mount Vernon in 1963 was undefeated, beat Upper Arlington. In '64, the same deal, comes down to the last game. Upper Arlington, Mount Vernon, undefeated, CBL championship at Mount Vernon. Tremendous crowd. The story is some malfunction of the clock. Last play of the game. Mount Vernon's leading by like 4 points. The clock breaks. The officials gave Mount Vernon gave Upper Arlington an extra play, and they beat Mount Vernon on the last play of the game. And that's the only game that Mount Vernon had lost in 2 seasons, '63 and '64. I don't know if Paulette's ever talked to, Jimmy's mentioned some of the great teammates, some names that maybe you would remember. His sophomore year, they had a kid named Steve McMains, who was a phenomenal high school football player. Maybe one of the most physical players in Mount Vernon history. Kundra at quarterback, Randy Clements. I mean, they had some great teams. And senior year, a little different story. And I'll get down here, sit down here real quick. This is a true story. Mount Vernon used to scrimmage Ashland preseason. And his senior year, the scrimmage was at Ashland. And this was a real highlight in this part of the state at that time. Mount Vernon had Bird. Ashland had a kid named Roosevelt Robinson, running back. He was a little bigger than Bird. This kid went right from Ashland High School to the NFL, the Buffalo Bills. So that's the kind of talent that they had on the field. Jimmy was running a sweep. He got hit out of bounds, and the old down markers had points on him where you push him down into the ground. He fell on that and just cut the heck out of his elbow. He had to get like 14 stitches. So the first 2 or 3 weeks, every time he'd bend his arm, it would break open. So that hindered him, and then later on his senior year, he broke his thumb. So he missed a half the season because of that. Had it not been for those missed games, he would be Mount Vernon's all-time leading scorer in Russia. But that didn't happen. But anyway, I'm proud to have a chance to recognize Jim. I'm proud to say I knew him as a friend. I only wish I could have been here when they had the ceremony for his passing. Again, we were out of town at that time. But a lot of great memories about Jimmy Bird, about those great teams, and what a terrific athlete. I'd like to bring Pauline up, if you would, please. Just to you. Okay. The Sports Hall of Fame has recognized Jimmy Bird for his extraordinary achievements, contributions to Knox County sports, and is hereby inducted on this date. So we want to congratulate you then. Okay, we're good. So we'll set this right here. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm sure Jim is smiling down right now, knowing that he got this wonderful award. Because he's gotten several of them, I believe, so, oh, okay. Am I talking loud enough? But anyways, I think it's really nice that he's still gotten another award after he passed now, not 12 years ago. So, at too young of an age, but he's still smiling down, and he's happy to see this. And we have 2 beautiful daughters and 5 granddaughters. So
4 granddaughters and 1 great
well,
granddaughter.
I'm
She's like, I'm gonna add the great.
but I'm sure he's smiling down on all of them. And it was wonderful that he started playing pool. And we had just bought a townhouse with 3 levels, and he surprised us one day when we came home. He had gotten a pool table and put it on the lower level. He became a real pool player, didn't he? And he tried to get the girls to play once in a while. Did you? But he really did go from the sports he was in to being a pool player, and he loved it very much. And we really had a wonderful life and 2 beautiful daughters, right? And I don't know, did you have anything to say?
Yes, I did. I appreciate this greatly, and I have a question because I didn't get many stories from him. He taught me a lot about sports, but I don't know what his experience was. He used to tell me that in the gym, before basketball games, the bird is the word song would play.
What?
The bird is the word. Oh, so he.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Oh. And then we have, I really appreciate this. You guys have definitely brought my family together, even though it's for a short time.
We
Please
have a lot
stand,
of family here.
everybody. Stand.
But anyways, thank you all for, this. We really love it, and this means a lot. And I know he's smiling down, too. He did. Thank you all.
To Todd Junior High, I think you can all hear me. If not, wave. I'm David Greer, another member of the Hall of Fame Selection Committee. Notice I am blue all the way, even down to my sneakers. No, this is not for that team up north. Rather, it shows my pride in my Danville roots. I'm a retired teacher from Danville, a Danville alumnus, and it would be my pleasure to introduce to our next inductee, who for many years was a fellow Danville High School educator. Please remember the full details of our inductees can be found in the printed program. Hope you've already read that, but please don't read it right now, because I want you to hear other things I have to say about Paul Hynum. Thanks to Paul, 5 straight years, I had a seat in the front row at St. John Arena in Columbus. I did have to pay for that seat, but I did not have to pay for the ride, because I was the chaperone, the pep bus when the Danville girls basketball team went to the Final Four state tournament. Excellent teams were the rule when Paul was at Danville. One year they were undefeated in the regular season, a feat he accomplished once at Mount Vernon as well. Most years we lost only 2 games, the last game in the tournament trail, and one at the hands of perennial state championship rival West Holmes, a school that was 2 notches higher than us. Paul scheduled them to help toughen our team. By the way, your program does not reflect what happened between Paul's tenure at Danville and then later at Mount Vernon. In just 2 years at Tri-Valley near Dresden, he took a team from worst of 10 in their league, worst to first in their league standings. The success of Paul's coaching was revealed in several habits. The ones that impressed me most were: 1, highly organized practices. He accomplished much in a short time, relying on his assistant coaches, one is here, to keep all players busy and learning at either end of the floor. Several of those assistants went on to become head coaches on their own right. One young lady player from the 1980s team recently celebrated 25 years as an assistant coach at Danville. Paul, how'd she do that? Neither you nor I got 25 years older. 2, the player's ability to master the fundamentals. Much of this stemmed from his Biddy Ball program, whereby girls as early as 4th grade started to master the skills they would need to be a Lady Blue Devil. Believe me, I am no basketball expert. But when I watched pregame drills, I always noted when the layups moved to the left side of the, well, our girls did it right. Dribble with the left hand, jump off with the right. And finally, I remember Paul as a fellow educator. Many times, right after a foul was called, or we suffered a turnover, or maybe even after a make, he would catch the girl's attention, demonstrate the correct way she could have defended her opponent, handled the ball, followed through in the shot, whatever. He recognized the value of what we educators value as the teachable moment, and inspired his players to always to seek constant improvement in their skills and their basketball knowledge. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's with intense pride and pleasure I present to you our next inductee, Paul Heine.
I'd like to thank the committee. I'd like to thank the committee for bestowing this honor upon me. I want to say a little bit about Jim Bird before I go on. Jim was kind of my idol when I was a kid. He was a couple years younger than me. Played on the same Little League team. First time I met Jim, I think I was maybe 6 years old. And he lived up over the hill from us. And in the neighborhood, north end of Mount Vernon, we were organizing a baseball game, and I was playing with some older guys. And we saw Jim coming up over the hill. And these guys said, let's hide. Why are we hiding? They said, well, he's too good. You know, so he actually eventually caught up with us and begged us to let him play. We eventually let him play. And of course, he dominated us. But my first experience trying to tackle Jim was when I was a sophomore. I probably weighed about 135 pounds then. And the hole opened up, and it was Jim and I. And he probably weighed 185, 190. Of course, I made the mistake of trying to hit him in the legs, which was a huge mistake. And I didn't get the number of the taxi cab that ran over me that day. I ended up on the ground. But he was just such a natural. And JD probably doesn't know this, but I remember a debate between my father and a guy named Mike Carpenter. I think Mike's son played Little League with JD. And I can remember my dad saying, Jim never misses a ball as a catcher. No matter if it's in the dirt. And Mike Carpenter said, JD's the same way. He never misses a ball. Remember they had an argument about who was a better catcher at that time. But, I got choked up a little bit today. My daughter Kelly, who's here, is back in the back row with my wife Jenny. She got on Facebook, and some of my former players sent letters to me. And she brought them to my house this morning, and I got a little choked up reading those. And it was amazing, their writing ability was so good. She must have had Mr. Toole as a teacher in English. But my wife was great. She never really complained about me leaving for some reason. When I went to scout or was gone from home for practices or camps or whatever in the summer. And she was great. I've got 3 wonderful kids and 3 beautiful grandchildren. That I finally got grandchildren after 70 years, and it's an amazing amount of joy that they bring to us. But I feel pretty good about the effort that I made as a coach, and also the effort that I made before my senior year. Not that I really knew what I was doing. I can remember we played aerial football down at the football field. That's kind of how we stayed in shape. It was a game where you could throw a pass no matter where you were. You could be across the line. But if they dropped the pass, it was the other team's ball. And I can remember the high school guys playing against the college guys. I think JD was in college at that time. And there was a lot of trash talking going on back and forth. But that's how kind of we got in shape back in those days. And I would stop at Riverside Park maybe on the way home and play a little bit of basketball with Mike Lowell and JD and Jim Bird and some of the guys. And I was working with my dad at the time on construction. He was a commercial electrician. And I would stay out too late, and then I'd have to get up the next morning and crawl in the back seat, ride to Mansfield, sleep all the way up there. Work day was over, I got in the back seat, slept all the way home. And I couldn't understand why I didn't gain any weight. I think I probably weighed about 165 pounds at the time. But, I feel good about the effort that I put forth in coaching. I spent a lot of time and effort on it, and I think I pretty much outworked a lot of my opponents, and that's why we were successful. And, Andy Rooney said one time on 60 Minutes, I always loved him at the end of 60 Minutes, he said, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And that was no problem for me doing that. But, it's quite an honor to be included with these great individuals that are inducted into the Hall of Fame. Can't really believe that I'm one of them. And I was really surprised when I got the call that I've been inducted, and some of these people are just legendary. You think of Dick Schuff and some of the Jim Bird, Jim Stillwagon, Richie Hoyt, guys are just no-brainers as far as getting in the Hall of Fame. But you know, I can't tell you how much this means to me and what an honor it is. And I thank you guys for all coming.
Paul's been a friend for many years, and what we probably missed there was what a fine athlete he was. He was a three-sport guy. A lot of guys play three sports, but did they excel at three sports? Very few people do. And did they go to college, and were they good enough to play? He was at Toledo in the golden age up there. They won 35 straight games in football. Didn't play his senior year. What does he do after not playing baseball for 3 years? He goes out and makes the baseball team. Who does that? I'll tell you a story about him, and I know this is absolutely true. Don't think it's a joke. This is a true story. He told it to me himself. I told you that girls like athletes, and you know they like Paul. You know, he'd come home from college in the summertime and he'd play softball down there at Riverside Park, and he told me, he says, I was dating 3 different girls at the time. He goes, it went fine until all 3 of them showed up at the same ball game one night. He said, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just kept trying to think what I was going to do. When the last out was made in center field, he jumped the fence, got in his car, and went home. It gets worse than that. He was married at the time. Now that part I made up. The other part is true. The other part is true. All right. Ted Williams. What a cool name. Why couldn't I have had a name like Ted Williams? You know, no one was ever scared of John Lambert. But you hear Ted Williams? Don't you visualize a guy with a baseball bat?
Yeah.
You know, that would scare me. If you never saw him play, I'm telling you, you missed something, because he was so smooth and graceful. You just didn't realize how intense he was. And he was unselfish to boot. And you can't say that about a lot of superstars. But the measure of a great athlete is what they do under pressure. My favorite all-time sports quote came from the great boxer Jack Dempsey. He said, sure, lots of guys can do it. But can they do it at 8 o'clock on Saturday night in Madison Square Garden? They had their true test the second game of the tournament their senior year, 1974. And folks, some of you weren't even around then. But those of you who were and saw it, next year we'll be looking back 50 years. 50 years ago we saw Ted play in high school. Second game of the tournament, they had to face Whitehall. Whitehall had already beaten them twice during the year. Is that right, Mike? That is right. They faced him in the tournament. And what made him tough was they had 6'7" Terry Burris. Terry Burris was first team All-Ohio, played 4 years at Ohio State. Had already beaten Mount Vernon twice. What could Ted do? I'll tell you what he did. He had 36 points and 25 rebounds. And they avenged their loss and kept winning, went all the way to the state tournament. And if you look in your program there, I got to get it in front of me here. Other than Ray Allen, that's the sweetest jump shot I ever saw in my life. This is how much the University of Toledo thinks of Ted Williams. You can't get a hold of anybody. I don't care if you call a high school, if you call a college and say, hey, I got a question about somebody. They may never get back with you. And when they do, it's not a big deal. I called the athletic director at the University of Toledo and I said, I want the picture that you used for his Hall of Fame induction at Toledo. The next day I had a copy. And that's it right there. That's his Hall of Fame photo. And that guy that's going up for the block, sorry buddy, you're too late. He's ready to launch it right there. And he had a great high school career, he had a great college career, and in high school, nobody to this date, I said, you have to do something nobody else has done, I was sitting the bench in 1964 when Barry Bishop got on a roll in a tournament and scored 146 or 47 points, I think. I said, that'll never be broken. 10 years later, Ted Williams comes along, scores 157 points. Unless somebody has a 30-point average and wins a state tournament, that record's going to stand in Knox County forever. So it's a great honor to induct an athlete I obviously admired greatly. In Ted's absence, his teammate, Mike Kelly, who I just found out this week is our next inductee's uncle, Rob Kelly. And so Mike has consented to come up and accept Ted's induction certificate for him. Mike, please come forward.
I'll be real brief here. It's a real honor to be up here. On behalf of my friend Ted, and as I said, my nephew Rob is going, and also so I'm a blessed man today. I'm a blessed man for sure. I could say a lot about Ted right now. I'm not going to really spend a whole lot of time. You know, they put in the program his accomplishments. What I will tell you about him, he was a great teammate. He's a great friend. And he was very sorry that he couldn't be here today. His 2-year-old granddaughter is out there having a birthday party at the same time. He's got to go to that. But yeah, you were talking about the Whitehall game, and I remember we didn't take buses that year. We were riding in cars, and I was riding with Coach Keith Marin, who just passed away recently, and he said, "You know, Mike, whoever wins this game might go to the state finals." And he was right. He was right. And Ted put on a performance like no other. He was a gamer. You knew what you were going to get night to night from him. And you know, besides being really humble, he let his game do the talking. He didn't trash talk anybody. I mean, he would just go out there, kick his butt, and you know, that was it. So it's a real honor to be up here today. I know he would like to thank the committee for this honor. He would like to also thank coaches, Coach Keith Marin, Coach McDonald from Toledo. We wanted to thank him as well. He specifically told me not to thank Bob Nicholas, who was the head coach, because he hated him. He said, "Do you want me to say something about Coach Nichols?" He said, "Absolutely not." But yeah, he would also like to, you know, thank his mom Nancy, his kids Tyler, Tim, and Jennifer, and his wife Judy. So, and Judy was the one that really, when I spoke to Ted this morning, he said, "How'd you get roped into this?" And I said, "Well, your wife wanted me to do it." So, anyway, but it's a real honor to be up here, and thank you very much.
JD come up and induct Rob Kelly, but before, I want you to do something here for me. I want you to turn to the back where all the photos are. I've got multiple pictures in the back. And I want you to find the one of Rob Kelly on the blitz. The perfect photograph. That photograph was in Sports Illustrated. And I'm thinking, what is that quarterback for Penn State thinking right now? He's in big trouble. So you find that one where Rob's putting the rush on, and he's about 4 feet off the ground, and that quarterback has no chance. So with that mindset, JD.
Obviously, John Lambert's never been to a Newer Catholic banquet. Hey, this is a great honor for me to be able to present Robbie. I think most of you know, Mount Vernon folks know that the Kelly family was a very strong St. Vincent family. I had an opportunity as a young kid, as a freshman, to play with Jim Kelly, who was a senior, And when I made the statement, I think he's the best football player in St. Vincent history, I really believe that. First of all, because I was afraid of him, okay? But in all seriousness, I don't know why this happened, but I always felt he kind of took me under his wing, kind of looked out for me. And of course, his mom, Robbie's mom, Rose, okay, the Costello family lived right across the street. I don't know how many kids did you all have? 7 children. Very, very strong, devout Catholic family. And that's probably the reason, when it's all said and done, more than anything else, is why Robbie and his sisters came to Newark Catholic. The 2 girls actually made the drive every day. They went to St. Vincent's. They drove for a couple years to Newark every day to attend class. And I think the family decided we're going to stick with this Catholic education. We'll make the sacrifice. And we don't want the boys driving. So they actually moved to Newark, not too far from the high school. And it's interesting, the family was incredible. Beth, the oldest daughter, a tremendous athlete, full scholarship basketball to Fordham. Aaron, same situation, tremendous athlete, full scholarship to Duquesne, both Catholic schools. Robbie, Ohio State, NFL. Tommy had an appointment to West Point. Megan's a nurse now, I guess. So it was an incredible family, incredible family. Now, talk about Rob specifically, he was unique in that he had tremendous size for a running back, and especially at Ohio State for a defensive back. You don't find very many athletes, even today, that are 6'3", 200 pounds, that had the speed and the toughness that he had. I remember this like it was yesterday. I believe it was before Robbie's junior, senior year in the summer. I got a call from a coach named Tommy Reed, who at one time was the head coach at Miami, but he was a long-time assistant at Michigan. And we had a great player named Jeff Uhlenhake, who he tried to recruit at Miami. Uhlenhake went on and played 12 years in the NFL, All-American at Ohio State. So I knew Coach Reed a little bit. I felt comfortable with him. Well, I get this call in the summer before football season. I believe it was Rob's senior year. And he goes, Coach, he said, Tom Reed. I said, hey, Coach, how you doing? He said, hey, real quick, I don't want to keep you. He said, who is this Kelly kid? And I said, pardon me? Now, he's an assistant at Michigan, and he's calling me because Michigan had their camp that week. And I said, why are you asking? He said, well, you know, Rob Kelly ran the second fastest 40 in the whole camp. I said, really? He said, we're ready to offer him right now. He said, if he wants to be a Wolverine, we're ready to go right now. And I said, are you serious, Coach? He said, absolutely. So that's the first time, because I'm guilty. We don't build our athletes up a great deal when they play. We get after them pretty seriously in our practices and our games. That was the same with Robbie. And maybe even more so because I knew the family. I knew the toughness that he had. I knew Jim and I knew Rose, that I could coach this kid pretty hard. And I did coach him hard. But boy, did he respond. Tremendous senior year. Tremendous senior year. I was first team All-Ohio running back. It was the back of the year in the state of Ohio. He would have started and played in the North-South All-Star game, but he had a knee injury late in the year, his senior year. In fact, I'll be honest with you, we had a basketball team his senior year. Had he stayed healthy, I think might have made a run at a state championship in basketball. He was that good of a basketball player. He was a physical rebounding machine. We had to get that knee repaired. Ohio State wanted us to do that. They set him out his freshman year. He had a redshirt freshman year. Lettered as a sophomore, was dynamic on kickoff returns, kickoff coverage rather. People couldn't wait for the Buckeyes to kick off because Rob Kelly's he's gonna mix it up with somebody. And then started his junior and senior year. And if you think about this, he was fortunate to play in some of the great games in Ohio State modern history. The 95, 96 Notre Dame games. I had an opportunity to go to the game at Notre Dame. He had a tremendous game, had an interception, had a brilliant game defensively. That game probably won the Heisman Trophy for Eddie George, if any of you remember that game. The two schools had not played for 60 years, 1935, 1936, and here we are 60 years later, and we just saw one of the great games of all time a few days ago. And that last second win, you beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame. That's pretty serious stuff. They don't lose too often there. So anyway, we knew that Robbie had a chance to play at the higher level. And this is one of the great stories I used to, when I had an opportunity, excuse me, to talk at, do some motivational speaking years ago. It was the spring of his senior year, and I remember calling Rose to see how things were going. And I said, Rose, how things going? I said, with Robbie and so forth. And she said, well, we had a little run-in the other day. He was going to go to Boston to try to talk to some agents that might represent him. And she said he wasn't dressed the way I wanted him dressed, and we kind of had a little tiff about that, and I sent him back upstairs, and he came down in a suit because I wanted him to look right. I said, Rob, this is business, this isn't pleasure. He said, okay. So anyway, I said to Rose, I said, can you believe Robbie's going to have a chance to play in the NFL? And she said, that's interesting you say that, because we were in that same day, we're in the kitchen. And I said to Robbie, Robbie, can you believe you're going to get a chance to play in the NFL? And he said, he looked at his mom, looked at me and said, Mom, why are you so shocked? He got his wallet out. He had a little piece of paper. Said, I've read this. Said, I've read this every day since the 6th grade. Someday I will play in the NFL. I don't know if you remember that, but I do. Well, the rest is history. He played 3 years for the Saints, for the legendary coach Mike Ditka. I played a year with the New England Patriots. Tressel brought him back as a GA, finished his degree, I think it was in sociology, Rose, is that what he got his degree in? I honestly didn't know he was a graduate assistant at Ohio State there during that period. But here we're talking about a great kid, great athlete. I would say he's the best, physically, the best athlete I ever had an opportunity to coach. You saw him play many times, I think, coach at one time or another. Think about this. Tied the state record in the state championship game with 4 touchdowns. We played at Massillon. It was the last game I coached. He and my son Brian were best friends. Brian was a quarterback, Robbie's the tailback, so that was special. The year before, he had a 70-yard touchdown run called back. He would have had 5 touchdowns in the state championship game, but he tied the record with 4. This was interesting. The year before, I think about this often, we were a very average Newark Catholic team on paper. We had lost 3 or 4 games, we got into the playoffs, and we got on a roll. And we built, our confidence was going in. We played St. Henry High School in the semifinals. And what was amazing about this game, now think about this, here are these 2 small schools. There were 7 Division I athletes in that game. Bobby Hoyne was their quarterback, All-American at Ohio State. Kevin Hardings at center, All-American at Penn State, All-Pro with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had a tight end by the name of Niekamp, who was 6'5", about 245, who went to Ohio State on scholarship. He got banged up there. He was their starting center. St. Henry had won the state twice in a row in basketball. Their split end went to Toledo. We got Rob Kelly, and my son Brian played a little bit at the Naval Academy. 7, we weren't talking about, these are major 7-time, big-time programs in that little game. And they beat us 20-19 on a, we were talking about a questionable call. Mike Kelly and I were just talking about that. But I think back on that, I mean, that was an incredible deal. But when you get back to what Rob Kelly, he was a very, very competitive kid. Very competitive, from a competitive family, from a great family. Had great siblings. They were all did an excellent job at Newark Catholic. We're very proud of them, what they did. So it's my honor to recognize Rose and Jim Kelly to receive this honor in Rob Kelly's name. Folks.
Well, you know, in this day and age, people are flying here, flying there. I got a text from Mom. Mom, will you read this for me? So I'm reading to you from a text. And actually, I wish JD and Rob had gotten together because I may be repetitive. Some of the things that Rob mentioned. So, first of all, these are his words. I want to express my appreciation to the board for the honor of being inducted into the Knox County Sports Hall of Fame. And I want to congratulate the other inductees also. No one achieves success in any field without the encouragement and direction of many people. First off, I'd like to thank my parents, Jim and Rose Kelly, for all the love and support they have given me and my siblings through the years. The example they have given me is the reason I'm not able to be here with you today. They always put family first. And today, I am in Boulder, Colorado to celebrate my daughter Sloane's 13th birthday. If not for that, I would most certainly, oh Lord, just a second. I would most certainly be here today to receive this honor, for which I am very privileged. I was born in Mount Vernon in 1974 and began playing organized sports at Phillips Park in the minor league and then Little League. My first coach was Bill Harris, a man who was gentle but a great teacher of the sport. I played for the Exchange Club and we won the league both years. Instead of continuing with baseball, I joined the Colt football program and played for the Little, then Big Raiders under Coach Redbone Smith, who was a great teacher of football safety and technique and made the game fun for us. In order to continue my Catholic school education, my parents eventually moved to Newark so I could attend Newark Catholic as my older sisters had. My mother drove them back and forth until they were old enough to drive. And I remember my father declaring that my younger siblings and I would not be driving, and we left our dear hometown of Mount Vernon. My first coach at NC was Jim Marquis, an old school coach and teacher. He was also the track coach, so we did a lot of running in addition to football practice. My next coach was J.D. Graham, a true legend in Ohio high school sports. He also was a great teacher and created high expectations. In my experience, of all the coaches at any level I've had, he was the very best. His son Brian was our quarterback and we became best friends. In our senior year, we went on to win the Division V state championship game, which was a thrill for our team, coaches, families, and fans. Ohio State and John Cooper came calling, and I spent 5 years at Ohio State. I credit my defensive coach, John Tenuta, for giving me such encouragement and honing my skills that we won the Rose Bowl my senior year. We remain close friends to this day. I was fortunate enough to be drafted 33rd overall in the 1997 NFL Draft by the New Orleans Saints, and the infamous Mike Ditka was my coach. I retired from the NFL with a career-ending injury with the New England Patriots. I returned to OSU and obtained my degree as a graduate assistant under Jim Tressel, a fine coach and gentleman. I have been asked over the years how I got so lucky. It was once said, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And I worked hard with all my opportunities. Again, I thank you so much for this honor.
So you coached Rob Kelly. You ran like her there when his sisters were competing, the Kelly girls. And you personally knew Rose and Jim Kelly, right? And your wife's name? Your wife's first name?
Kelly.
Kelly. Talk about an influence, gee. I never connected that until today. Wow, this is going to be fun for me. Biffany Caston. I can recall, really, the first time I saw Biffany run the summer before her 7th grade year in Junior Olympics track. My daughter was a year older, and she was competing in that. My thought at the time was, why are they letting a 4th grade girl out there on that track? She was about that tall. But after I witnessed her smoking the field in the 800 as an almost 7th grader, which, by the way, that summer, you can read the bio, this is absolute truth. Before she entered 7th grade, she broke the high school record in the 800, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Now, after 6 years of intense work, right, with Coach Ann Ullman, she didn't let you off easy. Worked you in the summer, worked you all year. After 6 years, she brought that time down by 14 seconds. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but I figured it up last night. If she raced against herself as that 7th grader and as a senior, you would have beat yourself by 70 yards. So you kind of blew yourself out like you did those other girls, because I watched race after race, and it was always the same. She might be with them or a little bit behind, but when she shifted gears, it was always the same. They were straining, and she was just headed like Seabiscuit toward the finish line. And really, it was easy to see her talent, and it was easy to see Ann Ullman's talent. And so I went to Ann, and I said, hey, my daughter really likes to run. She doesn't have anything to do in the summer. Would you work with her? And Ann said, sure, bring her up to Fredericktown. So they worked out together as 7th and 8th graders. And so I'd have to say it's worked out for both of them, because Biffany, deservedly, as a 2-time state champion, is being inducted today. And about a month ago, we got a call from our daughter's college, Mount Union, and they're inducting her into their College Hall of Fame. And I'm thinking, like, what good timing is this? So that part, those two getting on like that, it's easy for me to understand. Here's the part that's really hard for me to understand, is where did that 34 years go? Because that's when it started. To place in the top 4 at the state meet all 4 years is very rare. In fact, in her division, only 2 girls have ever done that. To win it twice, because the second year you really got a target on your back. She didn't just win it. She won it by 15 and 20 yards both times. So they were easy wins. That's what makes you a legend. That's how you get to the Hall of Fame. So let me introduce our only 2-time track state champion, Biffany Caston.
Well, I told my son I was going to start off with a joke, so here it goes. If you're reading the program, it is not a typo. That is my name, Biffany. Not Tiffany. Biffany. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. I just want to say congratulations to all of the inductees. As I sat there listening, I was just blown away by all of the amazing talent. I almost feel like I don't belong here because it's just amazing. I accept this honor with a deep appreciation. When I heard that I was nominated, I was just dumbfounded. I was completely shocked that someone had nominated me. I couldn't believe it. I'm overwhelmed to actually have been chosen. It is with great pleasure to share this grand experience with my family that came here today, my friends that came here. Some even surprised me, and I'm so thankful for that. And then my dear coach, Ann Ullman, who has been such a huge part of my life. Thank you, Mrs. Ullman. And again, all of the inductees. And I'm so thankful to the committee who worked so hard. I couldn't believe he would call me and say, do you know this and do you know this? And I would be like, no, let me get my scrapbook out. But he knew things about me that I had forgot. I mean, you just forget. But running was my outlet. I loved it, and I did whatever I could. I didn't even, when I was in practice, I didn't let anyone beat me. I like, if they got close to me, I would just go faster. I did not want anyone to beat me. And I had a serious passion for it, and I think the common denominator behind everyone that came up here tonight is we had a passion for our sport, and we loved it. One more funny story, and then I'll go. I remember I was in cross country. I wasn't a big cross country fan. I was a diehard track fan, but I ran cross country because I felt it bettered me as an athlete. And I remember I was running, and all of a sudden this bee went inside my jersey. And I'm running, and I could not get this bee out of my jersey. And so I like hurried up, finished the race, and my coaches were like, oh my gosh, you just broke the record. What is going on? And I said, there's a bee in my jersey, and I just wanted it out of there. And so every track or every cross country meet since then, either they brought a jar of bees or they made some joke about, we're going to get a bee. We're going to sting you. So anyway, thank you so much. And this has been a blessing. And I am so thankful to be able to have my sons here to see this. So thank you so much for this.
They call it making a beeline for the finish line. Hey, someplace here, I don't know where it is. I think somebody walked off of my program. But if you'll open up your program, way to the back, thank you, to Biffany's bio there. I wanted to end with two things. I got the things. I put two photos in there because those are two wonderful photos. One is she's at the starting line at the state championship, and look at that intensity in her face. And the next one is just a glorious photo. I call that the pass, because her body language and those two who know they're beaten is completely different. And in the back, of course, she's on the podium, and not a lot of people get to stand on top of the podium. One other thing, so I think if I remember right, we inducted a couple of Yellow Jackets, we inducted a Buckeye, we inducted a Quaker. But if you turn to Rob Kelly's New Orleans photograph there, we only inducted one Saint. The Catholic faith, that's a big deal, isn't it? That's a big deal.
Don't tell him that.
One last thing, the original members of our first committee back in 2019 are photographed right there. Jim Spicer, J.D. Graham, Phil Hobler, who else is on there, J.D.?
Dr. Swager.
Dr. Swigan?
Yeah, Rod Beckett.
Rod Beckett. Dr. Rod Beckett. So, hey, we ran a few minutes over. I don't know who I'll blame for that. I hope you had a good time. Just thank the timers for showing up. All really well deserving. And just think,
Since you have
in the
a
last
direct connection.
125 years, there's been thousands of athletes. Your family member, your friend, is one of the first 21 to be honored, and they'll be enshrined forever. Thank you for coming.